Gaul said, "Randall Thor has called them to the heart of the stone." Perrin only grunted, but he hoped Moiraine had been among those summoned. He wondered whether this was Rand's way of helping him escape her. Whatever the reason, he was glad enough to take advantage of it. They stepped out of the last cramped stairway onto the ground floor of the stone, where cavernous hallways as wide as roads led to all the outer gates. There were no wall hangings here. Black iron lamps in iron brackets high on the walls lit the windowless passages, and the floor was paved with broad, rough stones able to stand long wear from horses' shod hooves. Perrin picked his pace up to a trot. The stables lay just in sight ahead down the great tunnel, the wide dragon wall gate itself standing open beyond, and only a handful of defenders for guard. Moiraine could not intercept them now, not without the Dark One's own luck. The stable's open doorway was an arch 15 paces across. Perrin took one step inside and stopped. The air was heavy with the smell of straw and hay, underlaid with grain and oats, leather and horse manure. Stalls filled with fine Tyrene horses, prized everywhere, lined the walls with more in rows across the wide floor. Dozens of grooms were at work, currying and combing, mucking out, mending tack. Without pausing, one or another sometimes glanced at where Fail and Loyal stood, booted and ready for travel. And beside them, Bane and Chiad, accoutred like Gaul, with weapons and blankets, water bottles and cooking pot. "Are they why you only said you would try?" Perrin asked quietly. Gaul shrugged. "I will do what I can, but they will take her side. Chiad is Goshiane. Her clan makes a difference. Her clan and mine have blood feud, Perrin, and I am no spear sister to her. But perhaps the water oaths will hold her. I will not dance spears with her unless she offers." Perrin shook his head. A strange people. What were water oaths? What he said, though, was, "Why are they with her?" "Bane says they wish to see more of your lands, but I think it is the argument between you and Fail which fascinates them. They like her, and when they heard of this journey, they decided to go with her instead of you. Well, as long as they keep her out of trouble." He was surprised when Gaul threw back his head and laughed. It made him scratch his beard worriedly. Loyal came toward them, long eyebrows sagging anxiously. His coat pockets bulged, as was usual when he was traveling, mainly with the angular shapes of books. At least his limp seemed better. "Fail is becoming impatient, Perrin. I think she might insist on leaving any minute. Please hurry. You could not even find the waygate without me. Not that you should try, certainly. You humans make me leap about, so I can hardly find my own head. Please hurry. I will not leave him," Fail called. "Not even if he is yet too stubborn and foolish to ask a simple favor. Should that be the case, he may still follow me like a lost puppy. I promise to scratch his ears and take care of him." The aiel women doubled over laughing. Gaul leaped straight up suddenly, kicking higher, 2 paces or more above the floor, while twirling one of his spears. "We will follow like stalking ridgecats," he shouted, "like hunting wolves." He landed easily, lightly. Loyal stared at him in amazement. Bane, on the other hand, lazily combed her short, fiery hair with her fingers. "I have a fine wolf skin with my bedding in the hold," she told Chiad in a bored voice. "Wolves are easily taken." A growl rose in Perrin's throat, pulling both women's eyes to him. For a moment Bane looked on the point of saying something more, but she frowned at his yellow stare and held her peace, not afraid, but suddenly wary. "This puppy is not well housebroken yet," Fail confided to the aiel women. Perrin refused to look at her. Instead, he went to the stall that held his dun stallion, as tall as any of the Tyrene animals, but heavier in shoulder and haunch. Waving away a groom, he bridled Stepper and led him out himself. The grooms had walked the horse, of course, but he had been confined enough to frisk in the quick steps that had made Perrin give him his name. Perrin soothed him with the sure confidence of a man who had shoed many horses. It was no trouble at all putting his high-cantled saddle on and lashing his saddlebags and blanket roll behind. Gaul watched with no expression. He would not ride a horse unless he had to, and then not a step farther than absolutely necessary. None of the aiel would. Perrin did not understand why. Pride, perhaps, in their ability to run for long distances. The aiel made it seem more than that, but he suspected none of them could have explained. The pack horse had to be readied too, of course, but that was quickly done, since everything Gaul had ordered was waiting in a neat pile. Food and waterskins, oats and grain for the horses. None of that would be available in the ways. A few other things like hobbles, some horse medicines just in case, spare tinderbox and such. Most of the space in the wicker hampers went for leather bottles like those the aiel used for water, only larger and filled with lamp oil. Once the lanterns on long poles were strapped atop the rest, it was done. Thrusting his unstrung bow under the saddle girth, he swung up into Stepper's saddle with the pack animal's lead in hand, and then had to wait, seething. Loyal was already mounted, on a huge, hairy, fetlocked horse, taller than any other in the stable by hands yet reduced nearly to pony size by the oja's long legs hanging down. There had been a time when the oja was almost as unwilling a rider as the aiel, but he was at home on a horse now. It was Fael who took her time, examining her mount almost as if she had never seen the glossy black mare before, though Perrin knew she had put the horse through her paces before buying, soon after they came to the stone. The horse, Swallow by name, was a fine animal of Tyrene breeding, with slender ankles and an arched neck, a prancer with a look of speed and endurance both, though shod too lightly for Perrin's taste. Those shoes would not last. It was all another effort to put him in his place, whatever she thought that was. When Fael finally mounted, in her narrow, divided skirts, she reined closer to Perrin. She rode well, woman and horse, moving as one. "Why can you not ask, Perrin?" she said softly. "You tried to keep me away from where I belong, so now you have to ask. Can such a simple thing be so difficult?" The stone rang like a monstrous bell, the stable floor leaping, the ceiling quivering on the point of coming down. Stepper leaped too, screaming, head flailing. It was all Perrin could do to keep his seat. Grooms scrambled off the floor where they had fallen and ran desperately to quiet horses, rearing, shrieking, attempting to climb out of their stalls. Loyal clung to the neck of his huge mount, but Fael sat swallow surely as the mare danced and squealed wildly. "Land!" Rand. Perrin knew it was him. The pull of Tavern dragged at him, two whirlpools in a stream, drawing one another. Coughing in the falling dust, he shook his head as hard as he could, straining not to dismount and run back up into the stone. "We ride," he shouted while tremors still shook the fortress. "We ride now, Loyal. Now." Fael seemed to see no more point to delay. She heeled her mare out of the stable beside Loyal's taller horse. Their two-pack animals pulled along, all galloping before they reached the Dragon War gate. The defenders took one look and scattered, some still on hands and knees. It was their duty to keep people out of the stone, and they had no orders to keep these in. Not that they would necessarily have been able to think straight enough to do so if they had had orders, not with the tremors just subsiding and the stone still groaning above them. Perrin was right behind with his own pack-horse, wishing the Ogier's animal could run faster, wishing he could leave Loyal's lumbering mount behind and outrun the suction trying to draw him back, that pull of Tavren to Tavren. They galloped together through the streets of Tyr toward the rising sun, barely slowing to avoid carts and carriages. Men in tight coats and women with layered aprons, still shaken by the upheaval, stared at them dazed, sometimes barely leaping out of the way. At the walls of the inner city paving stones gave way to dirt, shoes and coats, to bare feet and bare chests above baggy breeches held up by broad sashes. The folk here dodged no less assiduously, though, for Perrin would not let Stepper slow until they had galloped past the city's outer wall, past the simple stone houses and shops that clustered outside the city proper, into a countryside of scattered farms and thickets, and beyond the pull of Taveren. Only then, breathing almost as hard as his lathered horse, he reined Stepper to a walk. Loyal's ears were stiff with shock. Fael licked her lips and stared from the Ogier to Perrin, white-faced. What happened? What happened? Was that him? "I don't know," Perrin lied. "I have to go, Rand. You know that. You looked me in the face when I told you, and said I had to do what I thought I must." "Where are Bane and Chiad?" Fael said. "It will take them an hour to catch up now. I wish they would ride. I offered to buy them horses, and they looked offended. Well, we need to walk the horses anyway after that, to let them cool down." Perrin held back from telling her she did not know as much of Aiel as she thought she did. He could see the city walls behind them, and the stone rearing above like a mountain. He could even make out the sinuous shape on the banner waving over the fortress, and the displaced birds swirling about. Neither of the others could have. It was no difficulty at all to see 3 people running toward them in long, ground-eating strides, their flowing ease belying the pace. He did not think he could have run that fast, not for long, but the aiel had to have maintained their speed from the stone to be this close behind. "We'll not have to wait that long," he said. Fael frowned back toward the city. "Is that them? Are you certain?" Abruptly the frown shifted to him for a moment, daring him to answer. Asking him had been too much like admitting he was part of her party, of course. "He's very boastful of his eyesight," she told Loyal, "but his memory is not very good. At times I think he would forget to light a candle at night if I did not remind him. I expect he's seen some poor family running from what they think is an earthquake, don't you?" Loyal shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, sighing heavily, and muttered something about humans that Perrin doubted was complimentary. Fael did not notice, of course. Not too many minutes later, Fael stared at Perrin as the 3 aiel drew close enough for her to make out, but she said nothing. In this mood, she was not about to admit he had been right about anything, not if he said the sky was blue. The aiel were not even breathing hard when they slowed to a halt beside the horses. "It is too bad it was not a longer run." Bane shared a smile with Chiad, and both gave Gaul a sly look. "Else we could have run this stone dog into the ground," Chiad said, as if finishing the other woman's sentence. "That is why stone dogs take their vows not to retreat. Stone bones and stone heads make them too heavy to run." Gaul took no offense, though Perrin noticed he stood where he could keep an eye on Chiad. "Do you know why maidens are so often used as scouts, Perrin? Because they can run so far, and that comes from being afraid some man might want to marry them. A maiden will run 100 miles to avoid that." "Very wise of them," Fael said tartly. "Do you need to rest?" she asked the aiel women, and looked surprised when they denied it. She turned to Loyal anyway. "Are you ready to go on?" "Yeah, good. Find me this waygate, Loyal. We have stayed here too long. If you let a stray puppy stay close to you, it begins to think you will take care of it, and that will never do." "Fael," Loyal protested, "are you not carrying this too far?" "I will carry it as far as I must, Loyal." The waygate, ears sagging, Loyal puffed out a heavy breath and turned his horse eastward again. Perrin let him and Fael get a dozen paces ahead before he and Gaul followed. He must play by her rules, but he would play them at least as well as she. The farms, cramped little places with rough stone houses Perrin would not have used to shelter animals, grew more scattered the farther east they rode, and the thickets smaller, until there were neither farms nor thickets, only a rolling, hilly grassland. Grass as far as the eye could see, unbroken except for patches of bush here and there on a hill. Horses dotted the green slopes too, in clumps of a dozen or herds of 100, the famed Tyren stock. Large or small, each gathering of horses was under the eyes of a shoeless boy or two, mounted bareback. The boys carried long-handled whips that they used to keep the horses together or turn them, cracking the whips expertly to turn a stray without ever coming close to the animal's hide. They kept their charges clear of the strangers, moving them back if necessary, but they watched the passage of this odd company. 2 humans and an ajah mounted, plus 3 of the fierce aiel that stories said had taken the stone, with the bold curiosity of the young. It was all a pleasing sight to Perrin. He liked horses. Part of the reason he had asked to be apprenticed to Master Luhan had been the chance to work with horses. Not that there were so many as this in Eamon's field, nor so fine. Not so loyal. The ajah began muttering to himself, louder the farther they rode across the grassy hills, until at last he burst out in a deep bass rumble. Gone. All gone. And for what? Grass. Once this was an ajah grove. We did no great works here, not to compare with Manethran, or the city you call Caemlyn, but enough that a grove was planted. Trees of every kind, from every land and place. The great trees, towering 100 spans into the sky, all tended devotedly to remind my people of the steading they had left to build things for men. Men think it is the stonework we prize, but that is a trifling thing, learned during the long exile after the breaking. It is the trees we love. Men thought Mandragoran my people's greatest triumph, but we knew it to be the grove there. Gone now. Like this. Gone, and it will not come again. Loyal stared at the hills, bare save for grass and horses, with a hard face, his ears drawn back tight to his head. He smelled of fury, peaceful, most stories called Ogier, almost as pacific as the travelling people, but some, a few, named them implacable enemies. Perrin had only seen Loyal angry once before. Perhaps he'd been angry last night, defending those children. Looking at Lyle's face, an old saying came back to him, to anger the ajah and pull the mountains down on your head. Everyone took its meaning as to try to do something that was impossible. Perrin thought maybe the meaning had changed with the years. Maybe in the beginning it had been anger the ajah, and you pull the mountains down on your head. Difficult to do, but deadly if accomplished. He did not think he would ever want Loyal, gentle, fumbling Loyal, with his broad nose always in a book, to become angry with him. It was Loyal who took the lead once they reached the site of the vanished Ogier Grove, bending their path a little southward. There were no landmarks, but he was sure of his direction, surer with every pace of the horses. Ogier could feel a waygate, sense it somehow, find it as certainly as a bee could find the hive. When Loyal finally dismounted, the grass was little more than knee-high on him. There was only a thick clump of brush to be seen, taller than most, leafy shrubs as tall as the ogier. He ripped it all away almost regretfully, stacking it to one side. Perhaps the boys with the horses can use it for firewood when it dries. And there was the waygate. Rearing against the side of the hill, it appeared more a length of grey wall than a gate, and the wall of a palace at that, thickly carved in leaves and vines, so finely done that they seemed almost as alive as the bushes had been. 3,000 years at least it had stood there, but not a trace of weathering marred its surface. Those leaves could have rippled with the next breeze. For a moment they all stared at it silently, until Loyal took a deep breath and put his hand on the one leaf that was different from any other on the waygate. The trefoil leaf of Avendasora, the fabled tree of life. Until the moment his huge hand touched it, it seemed as much a part of the carving as all the rest, but it came away easily. Fail gasped loudly, and even the aiel murmured. The air was full of the smell of unease. There was no saying who it came from. All of them, perhaps. The stone leaves did seem to stir from an unfelt breeze now. They took a tinge of green, of life. Slowly a split appeared down the middle, and the halves of the waygate opened out, revealing not the hill behind, but a dull shimmering that faintly reflected their images. Once, it is said, Loyal murmured, the waygate shone like mirrors, and those who walked the ways walked through the sun and the sky. Gone now. Like this grove. Hastily pulling one of the filled pole lanterns from his packhorse, Perrin got it alight. It is too hot out here, he said. A little shade would be good. He booted Stepper toward the waygate. He thought he heard Fail gasp again. The dun stallion balked, approaching his own dim reflection, but Perrin heeled him onward. Slowly, he remembered. It should be done slowly. The horse's nose touched its image hesitantly, then merged in, as though walking into a mirror. Perrin moved closer to himself, touched. Icy cold slid along his skin, enveloping him hair by hair. Time stretched out. The cold vanished like a pricked bubble, and he was in the midst of endless blackness, the light of his pole lantern, a crushed pool around him. Stepper and the packhorse whickered nervously. Gaul stepped through calmly and began preparing another lantern. Behind him was what seemed like a sheet of smoked glass. The others were visible out there, Loyal getting back on his horse, Fail gathering her reins, all of them creeping, barely moving. Time was different inside the ways. Fail is upset with you, Gaul said once he had his lantern alight. It did not add much illumination. The darkness drank in light, swallowed it. She seems to think you have broken some sort of agreement. Bane and Kiad. Do not let them get you alone. They mean to teach you a lesson for Fail's sake, and you will not sit on that animal so easily if they manage what they plan. I agreed to nothing, Gaul. I do what she's forced me to do through trickery. We will have to follow Loyal as she wants soon enough, but I mean to take the lead for as long as I can. He pointed to a thick white line under Stepper's hooves. Broken and heavily pitted, it led off ahead, vanishing in the blackness only a few feet away. That leads to the first guidepost. We will need to wait there for Loyal to read it and decide which bridge to take, but Fail can follow us that far. Bridge, Gaul murmured thoughtfully. I know that word. There is water in here? No, it isn't exactly that kind of bridge. They look the same, sort of, but maybe Loyal can explain it. The Aielman scratched his head. Do you know what you are doing, Perrin? No, Perrin admitted, but there's no reason for Fail to know that. Gaul laughed. It is fun to be so young, is it not, Perrin? Frowning, uncertain whether the man was laughing at him, Perrin heeled Stepper on, drawing the pack-horse behind. The lantern light would not be visible at all in here, 20 or 30 paces from its edge. He wanted to be completely out of sight before Fail came through. Let her think he had decided to go on without her. If she worried for a few minutes, until she found him at the guidepost, it was the least she deserved. Chapter 19. The wave dancer with the golden sun barely over the horizon, the shiny black lacquered carriage rocked to a halt at the foot of the wharf behind a team of 4 matched greys, and the lanky dark-haired driver in his black and gold-striped coat leaped down to open the door. No sigil adorned the door panel, of course. Tyrant nobles gave aid to Aes Sedai only under duress, no matter how effusive the smiles, and none wanted their names or houses linked to the tower. Elaine got down gratefully without waiting for Nynaeve, straightening her blue linen summer travelling cloak. The streets of the mall were rutted by carts and wagons, and the carriage's leather springs had not been very good. A breeze slanting across the Erenin actually seemed cool after the heat of the stone. She had intended to show no effects of the rough ride, but once upright, she could not help knuckling the small of her back. At least last night's rain still hosed the dust down, she thought. She suspected that they had been given a carriage without curtains on purpose. North and south of her, more docks like wide stone fingers stretched into the river. The air smelled of tar and rope, fish and spices and olive oil, of nameless things rotting in the stagnant water between the piers, and peculiar long yellow-green fruits in huge bunches heaped in front of the stone warehouse behind her. Despite the early hour, men wearing leather vests on shirtless shoulders scurried about, toting large bundles on bent backs, or pushing handcarts piled with barrels or crates. None spared her more than a passing, sullen glance, dark eyes falling quickly, forelock touched grudgingly. Most did not raise their heads at all. She was sad to see it. These Tyren nobles had handled their people badly. Mishandled them was more like it. In Andor, she could have expected cheerful smiles and a respectful word of greeting, freely given by straight-backed men who knew their worth as well as hers. It was almost enough to make her regret leaving. She had been raised to lead and one day govern a proud people, and she felt the urge to teach these folk dignity. But that was Rand's job, not hers. And if he doesn't do it properly, I will give him a piece of my mind, a bigger piece. At least he had begun by following her advice, and she had to admit he knew how to treat his people. It would be interesting to see what he had done by the time she returned. If there's a point to coming back, a dozen ships were clearly visible from where she stood, and more beyond, but one, moored across the end of the dock she faced, sharp bow upriver, filled her eyes. The Seafolk Raker was easily 100 paces long, half again as large as the next vessel in sight, with 3 great towering masts amidships, and one shorter on the raised deck at the stern. She had been on ships before, but never one so big, and never on one going to sea. Just the name of the ship's owners spoke of distant lands and strange ports. The Atha'an-Mir, the Seafolk. Stories meant to be exotic always contained the Seafolk, unless they were about the Aiel. Nynaeve climbed out of the carriage behind her, tying a green travelling cloak at her neck and grumbling to herself and to the driver. Tumbled about like a hen in a windstorm. Thumped like a dusty rug. How did you manage to find every last rut and hole between here and the stone, Goodman? That took true skill. A pity none of it goes into handling horses. He tried to hand her down, his narrow face sullen, but she refused his aid. Sighing, Elaine doubled the number of silver pennies she was taking from her purse. Thank you for bringing us safely and swiftly. She smiled as she pressed the coins into his hand. We told you to go fast, and you did as we asked. The streets are not your fault, and you did an excellent job under poor conditions. Without looking at the coins, the fellow gave her a deep bow, a grateful look, and a murmured, "Thank you, my lady," as much for the words as the money, she was sure. She had found that a kind word and a little praise were usually received as well as silver was, if not better, though the silver itself was seldom unappreciated, to be sure. "The light send you a safe journey, my lady," he added. The merest flicker of his eyes toward Nynaeve said that wish was for Elaine alone. Nynaeve had to learn how to make allowances and give consideration. Truly, she did. When the driver had handed their bundles and belongings out of the carriage, turned his team and started away, Nynaeve said grudgingly, "I shouldn't have snapped at the man, I suppose. A bird could not make an easy way over those streets. Not in a carriage, at any rate. But after bouncing about all the way here, I feel as if I'd been on horseback a week. It isn't his fault you have a sore." "Back," Elaine said with a smile to take away any sting as she took up her things. Nynaeve barked a wry laugh. "I said that, didn't I? You will not expect me to go running after him to apologize, I hope. That handful of silver you gave him should soothe any wounds short of mortal. You really must learn to be more careful with money, Elaine. We do not have the realm of Andor's resources for our own use. A family could live comfortably for a month on what you hand out to everyone who does the work they've been paid to do for you." Elaine gave her a quietly indignant look. Nynaeve always seemed to think they should live worse than servants, unless there was reason not to, instead of the other way around, as made sense. But the older woman did not appear to notice the expression that always put royal guardsmen on their toes. Instead, Nynaeve hoisted her bundles and sturdy cloth bags and turned down the dock. "At least this ship will be a smoother ride than that." "I do hope smooth. Shall we go aboard?" As they picked their way down the pier, between working men and stacked barrels and carts full of goods, Elaine said, "Nynaeve, the sea folk can be touchy until they know you, or so I was taught. Do you think you might try to be a little?" "A little what?" "Tactful, Nynaeve." Elaine skipped a step as someone spat on the dock in front of her. There was no telling which fellow had done it. When she looked around, they all had their heads down and were hard at work. Mishandling by the High Lords or no, she would have said a few quietly sharp words that the culprit would not have soon forgotten if she could have found him. "You might try to be a little tactful for once." "Of course." Nynaeve started up the raker's rope-railed gangway. "As long as they do not bounce me about." Elaine's first thought on reaching the deck was that the raker appeared very narrow for its length. She did not know a great deal about ships in truth, but to her it seemed a huge splinter. "Oh, light, this thing will toss worse than the carriage, however big it is." Her second was for the crew. She had heard stories about the Atha'an Mere, but had never seen one before. Even the stories told little, really. A secretive people who kept to themselves, almost as mysterious as the aiel. Only the lands beyond the waste could possibly be more strange, and all anyone knew of them was that the sea folk brought ivory and silk from there. These Atha'an Mere were dark, barefoot and bare-chested men, all cleanly shaven, with straight black hair and tattooed hands, moving with the sureness of those who knew their tasks well enough to do them with half a mind, but were putting their whole minds to it. There was a rolling grace to their movements, as though, with the ship still, they yet felt the motions of the sea. Most wore gold or silver chains around their necks, and rings in their ears, sometimes 2 or 3 in each, and some with polished stones. There were women among the crew too, as many as the men, hauling ropes and coiling lines right with the men, with the same tattooed hands, in the same baggy breeches of some dark oiled cloth, held by colourful narrow sashes and hanging open at the ankle. But the women wore loose, colourful blouses too, all brilliant reds and blues and greens, and they had at least as many chains and earrings as the men, including, Elaine noticed with a small shock, 2 or 3 women with rings in one side of their noses. The grace of the women outshone even that of the men, and put Elaine in mind of some stories she had heard as a child by listening where she was not supposed to. Women of the Atha'an Mere were, in those tales, the epitome of alluring beauty and temptation, pursued by all men. The women on this ship were no more beautiful than any others, really, but watching them move, she could believe those tales. 2 of the women, on the raised deck at the stern, were obviously not ordinary crew. They were barefoot, too, and their garb of the same cut, but one was clothed entirely in brocaded blue silks, the other in green. The older of the pair, the one in green, wore 4 small gold rings in each ear and one in the left side of her nose, all worked so they sparkled in the morning sunlight. A fine chain ran from her tiny nose ring to one earring, supporting a row of tiny dangling gold medallions, and one of the chains around her neck held a pierced golden box like ornate gold lace that she lifted to sniff from time to time. The other woman, the taller, had only 6 earrings in total and fewer medallions. The pierced box she sniffed at was just as finely wrought gold, though. Exotic indeed. Elaine winced just thinking about the nose rings and that chain. Something odd about the stern deck itself caught her eye, but at first she could not tell what. Then she saw. There was no tiller for the rudder. Some sort of spoked wheel stood behind the women, lashed down so it could not turn, but no tiller. How do they steer? The smallest riverboat she had seen had had a tiller. There had been tillers on all the others, ships lining the nearby docks. More and more mysterious, these sea folk. "Remember what Moiraine told you," she cautioned as they approached the stern deck. That had not been much. Even Aes Sedai knew little about the Athan Mir. Moiraine had imparted the proper phrasings, though, the things that had to be said for good manners. "And remember tact," she added in a firm whisper. "I will remember," Nynaeve replied sharply. "I can be tactful," Elaine truly hoped she would. The 2 seafolk women waited for them at the top of the stairs. Ladder, Elaine remembered, even when they were stairs. She did not understand why ships had to have different names for common things. A floor was a floor, in a barn or an inn or a palace. Why not on a ship? A cloud of perfume surrounded the two, a slightly musky scent wafting from the lacy gold boxes. The tattoos on their hands were stars and seabirds, surrounded by the curls and whirls of stylized waves. Nynaeve inclined her head. "I am Nynaeve Olmira, Aes Sedai, of the Green Ajah. I seek the sail mistress of this vessel and passage, if it pleases the light. This is my companion and friend, Elaine Trakand, also Aes Sedai, of the Green Ajah. The light illumine you and your vessel, and send the winds to speed you." That was almost exactly the way Moiraine had instructed them to speak. Not about Aes Sedai, of the Green Ajah. Moiraine had seemed resigned to that more than anything else, and amused at their choice of Ajah, but the rest. The older woman, with grey touches in her black hair and fine wrinkles at the corners of her large brown eyes, inclined her head just as formally. Nevertheless, she seemed to be taking them in from head to foot, especially the great serpent ring each wore on her right hand. "I am Koine Din Jubai, Wild Winds, sail mistress of Wave Dancer. This is Jorin Din Jubai, White Wing, my sister of the blood, and Windfinder of Wavedancer. There may be passage available, if it pleases the light. The light illumine you, and see you safe to your journey's end." It was a surprise that the 2 were sisters. Elaine could see the resemblance, but Jorin looked much younger. She wished the Windfinder were the one they had to deal with. Both women had the same reserve, but something about the Windfinder reminded her of Abienda. It was absurd, of course. These women were no taller than she herself. Their colouring could not have been more different from the aiel woman's, and the only weapon either had in sight was the stout knife tucked in her sash, looking very workmanlike, despite carvings and gold wire inlays on the handle. But Elaine could not help feeling some similarity between Jorin and Abienda anyway. "Let us talk then, sail mistress, if it pleases you," Nynaeve said, following Moiraine's formula of sailings and ports and the gift of passage. The seafolk did not charge for passage, according to Moiraine. It was a gift, which just coincidentally would be exchanged for a gift of equal value. Quine glanced away then, astern toward the stone and the white banner rippling over it. "We will talk in my cabin, Aes Sedai, if it pleases you." She motioned toward an open hatch behind that strange wheel. "The welcome of my ship to you, and the grace of the light be upon you until you leave his decks." Another narrow ladder staircase led down into a neat room, larger and taller than Elaine had expected from her experiences on smaller vessels, with windows across the stern and gimbaled lamps on the walls. Almost everything seemed to have been built into the room except for a few lacquered chests of various sizes. The bed was large and low, right under the stern windows, and a narrow table surrounded by armchairs stood across the middle of the room. There was very little clutter. Rolled charts lay on the table. A few ivory carvings of strange animals stood on railed shelves, and half a dozen bare-bladed swords of different shapes, some that Elaine had never seen before, rested on hooks on the walls. An oddly worked square brass gong hung from a beam over the bed, while right before the stern windows, as if in a place of honor, a helmet sat on a featureless wooden head carved for the purpose, a helmet like the head of some monstrous insect, lacquered in red and green, with a narrow white plume to either side, one broken. The helmet Elaine recognized. "Seanchan," she gasped before thinking. Nynaeve gave her a vexed look, and deservedly they had agreed it would make more sense and ring more true if Nynaeve, as the older, took the lead and did most of the talking. Cloyne and Jorin exchanged unreadable glances. "You know of them," the sail mistress said. Of course. One must expect Aes Sedai to know these things. This far east we hear a score of stories, the truest less than half true." Elaine knew she should leave it at that, but curiosity tickled her tongue. "How did you come by the helmet?" "If I may ask." "Wave Dancer encountered a Seanchan ship last year," Cloyne replied. "They wished to take him, but I did not wish to give him up." She shrugged slightly. "I have the helmet to remind me, and the sea took the Seanchan, the light be merciful to all who sail. I will not go close to a vessel with ribbed sails again." "You were lucky," Nynaeve said curtly. "The Seanchan hold captive women who can channel and make them channel as a weapon. If they had had one on that ship, you would be regretting ever having seen it." Elaine grimaced at her, though it was too late. She could not tell whether the seafolk women were offended by Nynaeve's tone. The pair kept the same neutral expressions, but Elaine was beginning to realize they did not show very much on their faces, not to strangers anyway. "Let us speak of passage," Cloyne said. "If it pleases the light, we may call where you wish to go. All things are possible in the light. Let us sit." The chairs around the table did not slide back. They and the table were fastened to the floor deck. Instead, the arms swung out like gates and latched in place once you had sat. The arrangement seemed to bear out Elaine's dire predictions of heaving and pitching. She did very well with it herself, of course, but too much rolling on a riverboat set Nynaeve's stomach jumping. It must be worse on the ocean than on a river, however fierce the wind, and the worse Nynaeve's stomach, the worse her temper. Nynaeve sicking up and in a bad collar at the same time. There were few things more dreadful in Elaine's experience. She and Nynaeve were placed together on one side of the table, with the sail mistress and the windfinder at the ends. At first it seemed strange, until she realized they would both look at whichever of the two was talking, allowing the other to watch them unobserved. Do they always deal with passengers this way, or is it because we're Aes Sedai? Well, because they think we are. It was a caution that everything might not be as simple as they hoped with these people. She hoped Nynaeve was taking notice. Elaine had not seen any order passed, but a slender young woman with only one ring in each ear appeared, bearing a tray with a square white brass-handled teapot and large handleless cups, not of seafolk porcelain as might have been expected, but thick pottery. Less likely to be broken in heavy weather, she decided bleakly. It was the young woman who took her attention, though, and nearly brought a gasp. She was bare to the waist, just like the men above. Elaine hid her shock very well, she thought, but Nynaeve sniffed loudly. The sail mistress waited until the girl had poured tea, brewed to blackness, then said, "Have we sailed, Doreli, when I did not see?" "Is there no land in sight?" The slender woman blushed furiously. "There is land, sail mistress." It was a miserable whisper. Cloyne nodded. "Until there is no land in sight, and has been none for one full day, you will work at cleaning the bilges, where garments are a hindrance. You may leave." "Yes, sail mistress," the girl said, even more woefully. She turned away, undoing her red sash dejectedly as she went through the door at the far end of the room. "Share this tea, if it please you," the sail mistress said, "that we may talk in peace." She sipped at her own and continued, while Elaine and Nynaeve were tasting theirs. "I ask that you forgive any offense, Aes Sedai. This is Dorel's first voyage, except between the islands. The young often forget the ways of the shorebound. I will punish her further if you are affronted." "There is no need," Elaine said hastily, taking the excuse to set her cup down. The tea was even stronger than it looked, very hot, unsweetened, and quite bitter. Truly, we were not offended. There are different ways among different peoples. The light said not too many more as different as that. Light, What if they don't wear any clothes at all once they get out to sea? Light. Only a fool takes offense at customs different from her own. Nynaeve gave her a level look, bland enough for the Aes Sedai they were pretending to be, and took a deep swallow from her cup. All she said was, "Please think no more of it." It was not possible to tell if she meant it for Elaine or the seafolk women. "Then we will speak of passage, if it pleases you," Coine said. "To what port do you wish to sail?" "Tanchico," Nynaeve said, a bit more briskly than she should have. "I know you may not mean to sail there, but we need to go quickly as only a raker can, and without stopping, if that is possible. I offer this small gift for the inconvenience." She took a paper from her belt pouch and unfolded it, pushing it down the table to the sailmistress. Moiraine had given that to them, and another like it, letters of rights. Each allowed the bearer to draw up to 3,000 gold crowns from bankers and moneylenders in various cities, though it was not likely any of those men and women knew it was White Tower money they held. Elaine had goggled at the amount. Nynaeve had gaped openly, but Moiraine said it might be needed to make the sailmistress forsake her intended ports of call. Coine touched the letter of rights with one finger, read, "A vast sum for the gift of passage," she murmured, "even counting that you asked me to alter my sailing plans. I am more surprised now than before. You know that we very seldom carry Aes Sedai on our ships, very seldom. Of all who ask passage, only Aes Sedai may be refused, and almost always are, as from the first day of the first sailing. Aes Sedai know this, and so almost never ask." She was looking into her teacup, not at them, but Elaine glanced the other way and caught the windfinder studying their hands lying on the table. No, their rings. Moiraine had not said anything about this. She had pointed out the raker as the swiftest ship available and encouraged them to make use of it. Then again, she had given them these letters of rights, very likely sufficient to buy a fleet of ships like this one. Well, several ships at the least, because she knew it would take that much to bribe them to carry us. But why had she kept secrets? A foolish question. Moiraine always kept secrets. But why waste their time? "Do you mean to refuse us passage?" Nynaeve had abandoned tact for bluntness. "If you do not carry Aes Sedai, why did you bring us down here? Why not tell us up above and be done with it?" The sailmistress unlatched one arm of her chair, rose and went to peer out of the stern windows at the stone. Her earrings and the medallions across her left cheek glittered in the light of the rising sun. "He can wield the one power, so I have heard, and he holds the sword that cannot be touched. The aiel have come over the dragon wall to his call. I have seen several in the streets, and it is said they fill the stone. The stone of Tyr has fallen, and war breaks over the nations of the land. Those who once ruled have returned and been driven back for the first time. Prophecy is being fulfilled." Nynaeve looked as confounded as Elaine felt at this change of subject. "The prophecies of the dragon?" Elaine said after a moment. "Yes, they are being fulfilled. He is the dragon reborn, sailmistress. He's a stubborn man who hides his feelings so deeply I cannot find them. That is what he is." Coine turned. "Not the prophecies of the dragon, Aes Sedai. The Jendai prophecy, the prophecy of the Coromor. Not the one you wait for and dread, the one we seek, herald of a new age. At the breaking of the world, our ancestors fled to the safety of the sea, while the land heaved and broke, as storm waves do. It is said they knew nothing of the ships they took to flee, but the light was with them, and they survived. They did not see the land again until it was still once more, and by then much had changed. Everything. The world drifted on the water and the wind. It was in the years after that the Jendai prophecy was first spoken. We must wander the waters until the Coromor returns and serve him at his coming. We are bound to the sea, the salt water courses in our veins. Most of us set no foot on the land except to await another ship, another sailing. Strong men weep when they must serve ashore. Women ashore go onto a ship to bear their children into a rowboat, if no more is at hand, for we must be born on the water, as we must die on it, and be given to it in death. The prophecy is being fulfilled. He is the Coromor. Aes Sedai serve him. You are proof of that you are here in this city. That is in the prophecy as well. The White Tower shall be broken by his name, and Aes Sedai shall kneel to wash his feet and dry them with their hair. You will have a long wait if you expect to see me wash any man's feet, Nynaeve said wryly. What does this have to do with our passage? Will you take us or not? Elaine cringed, but the sailmistress came back just as directly. Why do you wish to journey to Tanchico? It is an unpleasant port of call now. I docked there last winter. Shorefolk nearly swarmed my vessel, seeking passage out, to anywhere. They did not care, so long as it was away from Tanchico. I cannot believe conditions are any better now. Do you always question your passengers so? Nynaeve said. I've offered you enough to buy a village. 2 villages. If you want more, name your price. Not a price, Elaine hissed in her ear. A gift. If Cohen was offended, or even had heard, she gave no sign. Why? Nynaeve took a tight grip on her braid, but Elaine laid a hand on her arm. They had planned to keep a few secrets themselves, but surely they had learned enough since sitting down to alter any plan. There was a time for secrecy and a time for truth. We hunt the Black Ajah, sailmistress. We believe some of them are in Tanchico. She met Nynaeve's angry stare calmly. We must find them, else they may harm. The dragon reborn. The Koramur. The light see us safe to docking, the Windfinder breathed. It was the first time she had spoken, and Elaine stared at her in surprise. Jorin was frowning and not looking at anyone, but she spoke to the sailmistress. We can take them, my sister. We must. Quina nodded. Elaine exchanged looks with Nynaeve and saw her own questions mirrored in the other woman's eyes. Why was it the Windfinder who decided? Why not the sailmistress? She was the captain, whatever her title. At least they were going to get passage after all. For how much? For how much? Elaine wondered. How large a gift. She wished Nynaeve had not revealed that they had more than was in that one letter of rights. And she accuses me of tossing gold about. The door opened, and a heavy-shouldered, grey-haired man in loose green silk breeches and sash came in, ruffling through a sheaf of papers. 4 gold rings decorated each ear, and 3 heavy gold chains hung at his neck, including one with a perfume box. A long, puckered scar down his cheek and 2 curved knives tucked in his sash gave him something of a dangerous air. He was fastening a peculiar wire framework over his ears to hold clear lenses in front of his eyes. The sea folk made the best-looking glasses and burning lenses and the like, of course, somewhere on their islands, but Elaine had never seen anything like this device. He peered through the lenses of the papers and began talking without looking up. Quine, this fool is willing to trade me 500 snowfox pelts from Kandor for those 3 small barrels of 2 Rivers tabac I got in Ebudar. 500. He can have them here by midday. His eyes rose, and he gave a start. Forgive me, my wife. I did not know you had guests. The light be with you all. By midday, my husband, Coin said, I will be falling down river. By nightfall, I will be at sea. He stiffened. Am I still cargo master, wife, or has my place been taken while I did not see? You are cargo master, husband, but the trading was stopped now, and preparations begin for getting underway. We sail for Tanchico. Tanchico! The papers crumpled in his fist, and he brought himself under control with an effort. Life, no. Sailmistress, you told me our next port was Moiraine, and then eastward to Shara. I have traded with that in mind. Shara, sailmistress, not Tarabon. What I have in my holds will bring little in Tanchico. Perhaps nothing. May I ask why my trade is to be ruined and wave dancer impoverished? Quine hesitated, but when she spoke, her voice was still formal. I am sailmistress, my husband. Wave dancer sails when and where I say. It must be enough for now. As you say, sailmistress, he rasped, so it is. He touched his heart. Elaine thought Quine flinched, and padded out with his back stiff as one of the ship's masts. I must make this up to him, Quine murmured softly, staring at the door. Of course it is pleasant making up with him. Usually, he saluted me like a deck boy, sister. We regret being a cause of trouble, sailmistress, Elaine said carefully, and we regret having witnessed this. If we have caused any embarrassment to anyone, please accept our apologies. Embarrassment? Cohen sounded startled. Aes Sedai, I am sailmistress. I doubt your presence embarrassed Torum, and I would not apologize to him for that if it did. Trade is his, but I am sailmistress. I must make up to him, and it will not be easy, since I must keep the reason secret still, because he is right, and I could not think quickly enough to give him a reason beyond what I would give a raw hand. That scar on his face he earned clearing the seanchan from waver dancers' decks. He has older scars earned defending my ship, and I have only to put out my hand to have gold placed in it because of his trading. It is the things I cannot tell him I must make up to him, because he deserves to know. I do not understand, Nynaeve said. We would ask you to keep the black ajah secret. She shot a hard look at Elaine, one that promised hard words once they were alone. Elaine intended a few words of her own about the meaning of tact. But surely 3,000 crowns is reason enough to take us to Tanchico. I must keep you secret, Aes Sedai, what you are and why you travel. Many among my crew consider Aes Sedai bad luck. If they knew they not only carried Aes Sedai, but toward a port where other Aes Sedai may serve the Father of Storms. The grace of the light shone on us that none was close enough to hear me call you so above. Will it offend if I ask you to keep below as much as possible and not to wear your rings when on deck? For answer, Nynaeve plucked her great serpent ring off and dropped it into her pouch. Elaine did the same, a bit more reluctantly. She rather enjoyed having people see her ring. Not quite trusting Nynaeve's remaining store of diplomacy at this point, she spoke up before the other woman could. Sailmistress, we have offered you a gift of passage if it pleases you. If it does not, may I ask what would? Coin came back to the table to look at the letter of rights again, then pushed it back to Nynaeve. I do this for the Coromur. I will see you safe ashore where you wish, if it pleases the light. It shall be done. She touched the fingers of her right hand to her lips. It is agreed under the light. Jorin made a strangled sound. My sister, has a cargo master ever mutinied against his sailmistress? Coin gave her a flat-eyed stare. I will put in the gift of passage from my own chest, and if Torum ever hears of it, my sister, I will put you in the bilges with Dorelle, for ballast perhaps. That the two seafolk women had dropped formality was confirmed when the Windfinder laughed aloud. And then your next port would be in Chachin, my sister, or Camelin, for you could not find the water without me. The sailmistress addressed Elaine and Nynaeve regretfully. Properly, Aes Sedai, since you serve the Coromur, I should honor you as I would sailmistress and windfinder of another ship. We should bathe together and drink honeyed wine, and tell each other stories to make ourselves laugh and weep. But I must make ready to sail, and... Wave Dancer rose like his name, leaping, pounding against the dock. Elaine whipped back and forth in her chair, wondering, as it continued, whether this was really better than being thrown to the deck. Then, finally, it was over, the leap slowing, growing smaller. Coin scrambled to her feet and raced for the ladder, Jorin at her heels, already shouting orders to look for damage to the hull. Chapter 20. Winds. Rising. Elaine struggled to open the latch on an arm of her chair and darted after them, almost colliding with Nynaeve at the ladder. The ship still rocked, if not as violently as before. Uncertain whether they were sinking, she pushed Nynaeve ahead of her, prodding her to climb faster. On the deck the crew dashed about, checking the rigging or peering over the side to inspect the hull, shouting about earthquakes. The same shouts were rising from the dockmen too, but Elaine knew better, despite the tumbled things on the piers and the ships yet pitching at their moorings. She stared toward the stone. The huge fortress was still except for masses of startled birds swirling about and that pale banner waving, almost lazily, in an isolated breeze. No sign that anything had ever touched the mountainous mass. That had been Rand, though. She was sure of it. She turned to find Nynaeve looking at her, and for a long moment their eyes met. A fine pickling if he's damaged the ship, Elaine said finally. How are we supposed to get to Tanchico if he goes tossing all the ships about? Light, he has to be all right. I can do nothing if he isn't. He is all right. He is. Nynaeve touched her arm reassuringly. No doubt that second letter of yours touched a nerve. Men always overreact when they let their emotions go. It's the price for holding them in the way they do. He may be the dragon reborn, but he must learn, man to woman, that what are they doing here? They were two men standing amid the bustling sea folk on the deck. One was tarmongaidon in his gleeman's cloak, with leather-cased harp and flute on his back, and a bundle lying at his feet beside a battered wooden box with a lock. The other was a lean, handsome tyren in his middle years, a hard, dark man wearing a flat, conical straw hat and one of those commoners' coats that fit snugly to the waist, then flared like a short skirt. A notched sword-breaker hung at a belt worn over his coat, and he leaned on a pale staff of knobbly, jointed wood, exactly his own height and no thicker than his thumb. A square-tied parcel dangled by a loop from his shoulder. Elaine knew him. His name was Julin Sandar. It was obvious the two men were strangers. Despite standing almost side by side, they held themselves with stiff reticence. Their attentions were directed the same way, though, split between following the sail mistress's progress toward the stern deck and peering at Elaine and Nynaeve, plainly uncertain, and masking it behind a brisk show of confidence. Tom grinned and stroked his long white moustaches and nodded every time he looked up at the two of them. Sandar made solemn, self-assured bows. "He is not damaged," Quine said, climbing the ladder. "I can sail within the hour, if it pleases you." "Well within, if a Tyren pilot can be found. I will sail without him, if not, though it means never returning to Tyr." She followed their gaze to the two men. "They ask passage, the gleeman to Tanchico, and the thief-catcher to wherever you travel. I cannot refuse them, and yet—" Her dark eyes came back to Elaine and Nynaeve. "I will do so, if you ask it." Reluctance to break custom battled in her voice with desire to help them, to serve the Coromor. The thief-catcher is a good man, even considering that he is shorebound. No offense to you, under the light. The gleeman I do not know, yet a gleeman can enliven a voyage and lighten tired hours. "You know Master Sandar," Nynaeve said. "Twice he has found those who pilfered from us, and found them quickly. Another shoreman would have taken longer, so you might ask more for the work. It is obvious that you know him as well. Do you wish me to refuse passage?" Her reluctance was still there. "Let us see why they are here first," Nynaeve said in a flat voice that did not bode well for either man. "Perhaps I should do the talking," Elaine suggested, gently but firmly. "That way you can watch to see if they are hiding anything." She did not say that way Nynaeve's temper would not get the better of her, but the wry smile the other woman gave her said she had heard it anyway. "Very well, Elaine. I will watch them. Perhaps you might study how I keep calm. You know how you are when you become overwrought." Elaine had to laugh. The two men straightened as she and Nynaeve approached. Around them the crew bustled, swarming into the rigging, hauling ropes, lashing some things down and unlashing others to orders relayed from the sail mistress. They moved around the foreshore people with barely a glance. Elaine frowned at tarmongaidon thoughtfully. She was sure she had never seen the gleeman before his appearance in the stone, yet even then she had been struck by something familiar about him. Not that that was likely. Gleemen were village performers. In the main, her mother had certainly never had one at the palace in Camelin. The only gleeman Elaine could remember seeing had been in the villages near her mother's country estates, and this white-haired hawk of a man had surely never been there. She decided to speak to the thief-catcher first. He insisted on that, she remembered. What was a thief-taker elsewhere was a thief-catcher in Tyr, and the distinction seemed important to him. "Master Sandar," she said gravely, "you may not remember us. I am Elaine Trakund, and this is my friend, Nynaeve Ormira. I understand that you wish to travel to the same destination as we. Might I ask why? The last time we saw you, you had not served us very well." The man did not blink at the suggestion he might not remember them. His eyes flickered across their hands, noting the absence of rings. Those dark eyes noted everything and recorded it indelibly. "I do remember, Mistress Trakund, and, well, but, if you will forgive me, the last time I served you was in the company of Matt Cauthon, when we pulled you both out of the water before the Silverpike could get you." Nynaeve harumphed, but not loudly. It had been a cell, not the water, and the black ajah, not Silverpike. Nynaeve, in particular, did not like being reminded that they had needed help that time. Of course, they would not have been in that cell without Julin Sandar. No, that was not entirely fair. True, but not completely fair. "That is all very well," Elaine said briskly, "but you still haven't said why you want to go to Tanchico." He drew a deep breath and eyed Nynaeve warily. Elaine was not sure that she liked him being more careful of the other woman than of her. "I was rousted out of my house no more than half an hour gone," he said carefully, "by a man you know, I think. A tall, stone-faced man calling himself Lan." Nynaeve's eyebrows rose slightly. "He came on behalf of another man you know, a shepherd, I was told. I was given a great quantity of gold and told to accompany you, both of you. I was told that if you do not return safely from this journey, shall we just say it would be better to drown myself than come back." Lan was emphatic, and the shepherd no less so in his message. "The sail mistress tells me I cannot have passage unless you agree. I am not without certain skills that can be useful." The staff whirled in his hands, a whistling blur, and was still. His fingers touched the sword breaker on his hip, like a short sword but unsharpened, its slots meant to catch a blade. "Men will find ways to get round what you tell them to do," Nynaeve murmured, sounding not unpleased. Elaine only frowned vexedly. Rand had sent him. He must not have read the second letter before he did. Burn him. Why does he leap about so? No time to send another letter, and it would probably only confuse him more if I did, and make me look a bigger fool. Burn him. "And you, Master Amyrlin," Nynaeve said. "Did the shepherd send a gleeman after us too? Or the other man, to keep us amused with your juggling and fire-eating, perhaps?" Tom had been scrutinizing Sandar closely, but he shifted his attention smoothly and made an elegant bow, only spoiling it with a too elaborate flourish of that patch-covered cloak. "Not the shepherd, Mistress Olmira. A lady of our mutual acquaintance asked me to accompany you. The lady who found you and the shepherd in Emon's field." "Why?" Nynaeve said suspiciously. "I too have useful skills," Tom told her with a glance at the thief-catcher. "Other than juggling, that is. And I have been to Tanchico several times. I know the city well. I can tell you where to find a good inn, and what districts are dangerous in daylight as well as after dark, and who must be bribed so the Civil Watch does not take too close an interest in your doings. They are keen on watching outlanders. I can help you with a good many things." That familiarity tickled at Elaine's mind again. Before she realized what she was doing, she reached up and tugged at one of his long white moustaches. He gave a start, and she clapped both hands to her mouth, flushing crimson. "Forgive me. I seem to remember doing that before. I'm sorry. Light, why did I do that? He must think me an imbecile. I would remember," he said very stiffly. She hoped he was not affronted. It was hard to tell from his expression. Men could be offended when they should be amused, and amused when they should be offended, if they were going to be traveling together. That was the first time she realized that she had decided they could come. "Nynaeve," she said. The other woman understood the unspoken question, of course. She studied the two men thoroughly, then nodded. "They may come, as long as they agree to do as they are told. I'll not have some wool-brained man going his own way and endangering us." "As you command, Mistress Olmira," Sandar said immediately with a bow. But Tom said, "A gleeman is a free soul, Nynaeve, but I can promise I will not endanger you." "Far from it. As you were told," Nynaeve said pointedly, "your word on it or you will watch this ship sail from the dock. The Athaan Mier do not refuse passage to anyone, Nynaeve. Do you think not?" "Was the thief-taker." Sandar winced. "The only one told he needed our permission." "As you are told, Master Amyrlin." Tom tossed his white head like a fractious horse and breathed heavily, but finally he nodded. "My word on it, Mistress Olmira." "Very well then," Nynaeve said in a bracing voice. "It is settled. You two find the sail mistress now, and tell her I said to find the pair of you a cubbyhole somewhere if she can, out of our way. Off with you now." Quickly, Sandar bowed again and left. Tom quivered visibly before joining him, stiff-backed. "Are you not being too hard on them?" Elaine said as soon as they were out of earshot. "That was not far, with all the hurly-burly on deck. We do have to travel together after all. Smooth words make smooth companions. Best to begin, as we mean to go on. Elaine, Tom Amyrlin knows very well we are not full Aes Sedai." She lowered her voice and glanced around as she said it. None of the crew was even looking at them, except for the sail mistress back near the stern deck, where she was listening to the tall gleeman and the thief-catcher. Men talk, they always do so. Sandar will know it soon enough as well. They present no trouble to Aes Sedai, but two accepted. Given half a chance, they would both be doing things they thought for the best, no matter what we said. I do not mean to give them even that half chance. Perhaps you're right. Do you think they know why we are going to Tanchico? Nynaeve sniffed. No, or they'd not be so sanguine, I think. And I would rather not tell them until we must. She gave Elaine a meaningful look. There was no need for her to say she would not have told the sailmistress either, had it been left to her. Here is a saying for you. Borrow trouble, and you repay tenfold. You speak as if you don't trust them, Nynaeve. She would have said the other woman was behaving like Moiraine, but Nynaeve would not appreciate the comparison. Can we? Julian Sandar betrayed us once before. Yes, I know no man could have avoided it, but there it is just the same, and Liandrin and the others know his face. We will have to put him in different clothes, perhaps make him let his hair grow longer, perhaps a moustache, like that thing infesting the Gleeman's face. It might do. And Tom Merrilin? Elaine asked. I think we can trust him. I don't know why, but I do. He admitted being sent by Moiraine, Nynaeve said wearily. What has he not admitted, though? What did she tell him that he hasn't told us? Is he meant to help us? Or something else? Moiraine plays her own game so often, I trust her this much more than I do Liandrin. She held her thumb and forefinger half an inch apart. She will use us. You and me both use us up if it helps Rand, or rather, if it helps whatever she has planned for Rand. She would leash him for a lapdog if she could. Moiraine knows what has to be done, Nynaeve. For once she was reluctant to admit that. What Moiraine knew had to be done might well speed Rand on his way toward tarmongaidon that much faster. On his way toward death, perhaps. Rand balanced against the world. It was silly, foolish, and childish that those scales should tremble so evenly for her. Yet she did not dare make them swing even in her mind, because she was not sure which way she would send them. She knows it better than he does, she said, making her voice firm. Better than we, perhaps. Nynaeve sighed. But I do not have to like it. Ropes were cast off at the bow, where triangular sails suddenly broke out, and Wave Dancer heeled away from the dock. More sails appeared, great white squares and triangles. The stern lines were cast off, and the ship curled out into the river in a great arc through the anchored ships awaiting their turn at the docks, a smooth curve that ended heading south, downriver. The sea folk handled their ship as a master horseman would, a fine steed. That peculiar spoked wheel worked the rudder somehow, as one of the bare-chested crewmen turned it. A man, Elaine was relieved to see, sailmistress and windfinder, stood to one side of the wheel, Coin issuing occasional orders, sometimes after a murmured consultation with her sister. Torum watched for a time with a face that might have been carved from a deck plank, then stalked below. There was a Tyren on the stern deck, a plump, dejected-looking man in a dull yellow coat with puffy grey sleeves, rubbing his hands nervously. He had been hustled aboard just as the gangway was being hauled up, a pilot who was supposed to guide Wave Dancer downriver. According to Tyren law, no ship could pass through the fingers of the dragon without a Tyren pilot aboard. His dejection certainly came from doing nothing, for if he gave any directions, the sea folk paid them no heed. Muttering about seeing what their cabin was like, Nynaeve went downstairs below. But Elaine was enjoying the breeze across the deck and the feel of starting out. To travel, to see places she had not seen before, was a joy in itself. She had never expected to, not like this. The daughter heir of Andor might make a few state visits, and she would make more once she succeeded to the throne, but they would be bounded about with ceremony and propriety. Not like this at all. Barefoot sea folk and a ship headed to sea. The riverbank slid by quite quickly as the sun climbed, an occasional cluster of huddled stone farmhouses and barns, bleak and lonely, appearing and vanishing behind. No villages, though. Tear would not allow the smallest village on the river between the city and the sea, for even the tiniest might one day become competition for the capital. The High Lords controlled the size of villages and towns throughout the country, with a buildings tax that grew heavier the more buildings there were. Elaine was sure they would never have allowed Ghodan to thrive on the Bay of Ramara if not for the supposed necessity of a strong presence overlooking Myane. In a way, it was a relief to be leaving such foolish people behind. If only she did not have to leave one foolish man behind as well. The number of fishing boats, most small and all surrounded by clouds of hopeful gulls and fisher birds, increased the farther south Wavedancer went, especially once the vessel entered the maze of waterways called the Fingers of the Dragon. Often the birds overhead and the long poles that held the nets were all that was visible, besides plains of reeds and knife grass rippling in the breezes, dotted with low islands where odd, twisted trees grew with spidery tangles of roots exposed to the air. Many boats worked right in the reeds, though not with nets. Once Elaine saw some of them close to clear water, men and women dropping hooked lines into the watery growth and pulling up wriggling, dark, striped fish as long as a man's arm. The Tyren pilot began to pace anxiously once they were in the delta, with the sun overhead, turning up his nose at an offered bowl of thick, spicy fish stew and bread. Elaine ate hers hungrily, wiping her pottery bowl with the last scrap of bread, though she shared his unease. Passages broad and narrow ran in every direction. Some ended abruptly, in plain sight, against a wall of reeds. There was no way to tell which of the others might not vanish just as suddenly around the next bend. Quine did not slow Wavedancer regardless, or hesitate at choosing a way. Obviously she knew the channels to take, or the windfinder did, but the pilot still muttered to himself as if he expected to run aground any moment. It was late afternoon when the river mouth suddenly appeared ahead, and the endless stretch of the Sea of Storms beyond. The seafolk did something with the sails, and the ship shuddered softly to a dead halt. It was only then that Elaine noticed a large rowboat skittering like a many-legged waterbug out from an island where a few forlorn stone buildings stood around the base of a tall, narrow tower where men stood small at the top beneath the banner of Tyr, 3 white crescents on a field of red and gold. The pilot took the purse Quine proffered without a word and scrambled down a rope ladder to the boat. As soon as he was aboard, the sails were swung about again, and Wavedancer breasted the first rollers of open sea, rising slightly, slicing through. Seafolk scampered through the rigging, setting more sails as the ship sped south and west, away from the land. When the last thin strip of land dropped below the horizon, the seafolk women doffed their blouses. All of them, even the sailmistress and the windfinder. Elaine did not know where to look. All those women walking about, half-dressed and completely unconcerned by the men all around them. Julien Sandar seemed to be having as hard a time as she was, alternating between staring at the women wide-eyed and staring at his feet, until he finally all but ran below. Elaine would not let herself be routed that way. She opted for staring over the side at the sea instead. Different customs, she reminded herself. As long they don't expect me to do the same. The very thought nearly made her laugh hysterically. Somehow, the black ajah was easier to contemplate than that. Different customs. Light. The sky grew purple with a dull golden sun on the horizon. Scores of dolphins escorted the vessel, rolling and arching alongside, and farther out, some sort of sparkling silver-blue fish rose above the surface in schools, gliding on outstretched fins, a span across for 50 paces or more, before plunging back into the swelling grey-green water. Elaine watched in amazement for a dozen flights before they did not appear again, but the dolphins, great sleek shapes, were wondrous enough. A guard of honor taking Wavedancer back where he belonged. Those she recognized from descriptions in books, it was said if they found you drowning, they would push you to shore. She was not sure she believed it, but it was a pretty story. She followed them along the side of the ship to the bow, where they frolicked in the bow wave, rolling on their sides to look up at her without losing an inch. She was almost in the narrowest point of the bow before she realized Tom Merrilin was there before her, smiling down at the dolphins a bit sadly, his cloak catching the wind like the cloud of sails above. He had rid himself of his belongings. He did seem familiar. Truly he did. "Are you not happy, Master Merrilin?" He glanced at her sideways. "Please call me Tom, my lady." "Tom, then, but not my lady. I am only Mistress Trakand here." "As you say, Mistress Trakand," he said with a hint of a smile. "How can you look at these dolphins and be unhappy, Tom?" "They are free," he murmured, in such a tone that she was not sure he was answering her. "They have no decisions to make, no prices to pay, not a worry in the world except finding fish to eat. And sharks, I suppose. And lionfish. And likely 100 more things I don't know. Perhaps it is not such an enviable life at that. Do you envy them? He did not answer, but that was the wrong question anyway. She needed to make him smile again. No, laugh. For some reason she was sure if she could make him laugh, she would remember where she had seen him before. She chose another topic, one that should be nearer his heart. Do you mean to compose the Epic of Rand, Tom? Epics were for bards, not gleemen, but there could be no harm in a little flattery. The Epic of the Dragon Reborn. Loyal means to write a book, you know. Perhaps I will, Mistress Trakand. Perhaps, but neither my composing nor the OGA's book will make much difference in the long run. Our stories will not survive in the long run when the next age comes. He grimaced and tugged one of his moustaches. Come to think of it, that may be no more than a year or two off. How is the end of an age marked? It cannot always be a cataclysm on the order of the breaking, but then, if the prophecies are to be believed, this one will be. That is the trouble with prophecy. The original is always in the old tongue, and maybe high chant as well. If you don't know what a thing means beforehand, there's no way to puzzle it out. Does it mean what it says, or is it a flowery way of saying something entirely different? You were talking of your epic, she said, trying to guide him back, but he shook his shaggy white head. I was talking of change. My epic, if I compose it, and Loiel's book, will be no more than seed, if we are both lucky. Those who know the truth will die, and their grandchildren's grandchildren will remember something different. And their grandchildren's grandchildren something else again. 24 generations, and you may be the hero of it, not Rand. Me, she laughed. Or maybe Matt, or Lan, or even myself. He grinned at her, warming his weathered face. Tom Merrilin. Not a gleeman, but what? Who can say? Not eating fire, but breathing it, hurling it about like an Aes Sedai. He flourished his cloak. Tom Merrilin, the mysterious hero, toppling mountains and raising up kings. The grin became a rich belly laugh. Rand or Thor may be lucky if the next age remembers his name correctly. She was right. It was not just a feeling. That face, that mirth-filled laugh, she did remember them. But from where? She had to keep him talking. Does it always happen that way? I do not think anyone doubts, say, that Arthur Hawkwing conquered an empire. The whole world, or near enough. Hawkwing, young mistress? He made an empire, all right, but do you think he did everything the books and stories and epics say he did, the way they say he did it? Killed the 100 best men of an opposing army, one by one. The two armies just stood there while one of the generals, a king, fought 100 duels. The books say he did. There isn't time between sunrise and sunset for one man to fight 100 duels, girl. She almost stopped him short, girl. She was daughter, heir of Andor, not girl, but he had the bit in his teeth. And that is only 1,000 years back. Go back further, back to the oldest tales I know, from the age before the age of legends. Did Mosk and Merc really fight with spears of fire? And were they even giants? Was Elspeth really queen of the whole world? And was Onla really her sister? Was Anla truly the wise counselor, or was it someone else? As well as what sort of animal ivory comes from, or what kind of plant grows silk, unless that comes from an animal too. I do not know about those other questions, Elaine said a bit stiffly, being called girl still rankled, but you could ask the sea folk about ivory and silk. He laughed again, as she had hoped, though it still did no more than drive home the certainty that she knew him. But instead of calling her foolish, as she half expected and was prepared for, he said, practical and to the point, just like your mother. Both feet on the earth, and few flights of fancy. She lifted her chin a little, made her face cooler. She might be passing herself off as simple Mistress Trakand, but this was something else. He was an amiable old man, and she did want to reason out the puzzle of him, but he was a gleeman after all, and he should not speak of a queen in such familiar tones. Oddly, infuriatingly, he appeared amused. Or mused. The Atha-an-Mier do not know either, he said. They see no more of the lands beyond the Isle Waste than a few miles around the handful of harbours where they are permitted to land. Those places are walled high, and the walls guarded, so they cannot even climb up to see what is on the other side. If one of their ships makes landfall anywhere else, or any ship not theirs, only the sea folk are allowed to come there. That ship and its crew are never seen again, and that is almost as much as I can tell you after more years of asking than I like to think of. The Athahan keep their secrets, but I do not believe they know much to keep here. From what I've been able to learn, the cauthon were treated the same, when they still had the right to travel the silk path across the waste. Cauthon traders never saw anything but one walled town, and those who wandered from it vanished. Elaine found herself studying him much as she had the dolphins. What kind of man was this? Twice now he might have laughed at her. He had been amused just then, as much as she hated to admit it, but instead he talked to her as seriously as, well, as father to daughter. You might find a few answers on this ship, Tom. They were bound east until we convinced the sail mistress to take us to Tanchico. To Shara, the cargomaster said, east of Moiraine, that must mean beyond the waste. He stared at her for a moment. Shara, you say? I have never heard any such name before. Is Shara city, or nation, or both? Perhaps I will learn a little more. What did I say? She wondered. I said something to make him think. Light. I told him we convinced Koine to change her plans. It could not make any difference, but she scolded herself severely. A careless word to this nice old man might do no harm, but the same might kill her in Tanchico, and Nynaeve too, not to mention the thief-catcher and Tom himself. If he was such a nice old man. Tom, why did you come with us? Just because Moiraine asked. His shoulders shook. She realized he was laughing at himself. As to that, who can say? Aes Sedai, asking favors are not easily resisted. Perhaps it was the prospect of your pleasant company for the voyage. Or perhaps I decided Rand is old enough to look after himself for a while. He laughed out loud, and she had to laugh with him. The idea of this white-haired old fellow looking after Rand. The feeling that she could trust him came back, stronger than ever, as he looked at her. Not because he could laugh at himself, or not only that. She could not have given a reason beyond the fact that, looking up into those blue eyes, she could not make herself believe this man would ever do anything to harm her. The urge to pull one of his moustaches again was almost overwhelming, but she schooled her hands to stillness. She was not a child after all. A child. She opened her mouth, and suddenly everything went out of her head. Please excuse me, Tom, she said hurriedly. I must. Excuse me? She started toward the stern quickly, not waiting for a reply. He probably thought the ship's motion had upset her stomach. Wave Dancer was pitching more rapidly, moving faster through the great sea swells as the wind freshened. Two men stood at the wheel on the stern deck. The muscle of both needed to hold the vessel on course. The sail mistress was not on deck, but the windfinder was, standing at the rail beyond the wheelmen, bare to the waist like the men, studying the sky where billowing clouds rolled more fiercely than the ocean. For once it was not Jorin's state of dress or undress that bothered Elaine. The glow of a woman embracing Saidar surrounded her, clearly visible despite the lurid light. That was what she had felt, what had drawn her. A woman channeling. Elaine stopped short of the stern deck to study what she was doing. The flows of air and water the windfinder handled were cable-thick, yet her weaving was intricate, almost delicate, and it reached as far as the eye could see across the waters, a web drawn across the sky. The wind rose higher, higher. The wheelman strained, and Wave Dancer flew through the sea. The weaving stopped. The glow of Sadar vanished, and Jorin slumped at the rail, leaning on her hands. Elaine climbed the ladder quietly, yet the seafolk woman spoke in a soft voice without turning her head as soon as she was near enough to hear. In the middle, as I worked, I thought that you were watching me. I could not stop then. There might have been a storm. Even Wave Dancer could not survive. The Sea of Storms is well named. It will throw up bad winds enough without my help. I meant not to do this at all, but Koine said, we must go quickly. For you, and for the Coromor. She raised her eyes to peer at the sky. This wind will hold until morning, if it pleases the light. This is why the seafolk do not carry Aes Sedai, Elaine said, taking a place beside her at the rail. So the tower won't learn. Windfinders can channel. That is why it was your decision to let us aboard, not your sister's. Jorin, the tower, will not try to stop you. There is no law in the tower to stop any woman channeling, even if she is not Aes Sedai. Your white tower will interfere. It will try to reach onto our ships, where we are free of the land and landsmen. It will try to tie us to itself, binding us away from the sea." She sighed heavily. "The wave that has passed cannot be called back." Elaine wished she could tell her it was not so, but the tower did seek out women and girls who could learn to channel, both to bolster the numbers of Aes Sedai, dwindling now compared to what they once had been, and because of the danger of learning unguided. In truth, a woman who could be taught to touch the true source usually found herself in the tower, whatever she wanted, at least until she was trained enough not to kill herself or others by accident. After a moment, Jorin went on. "It is not all of us. Only some. We send a few girls to Tar Valon, so Aes Sedai will not come looking among us. No ship will carry Aes Sedai, whose windfinder can weave the winds. When you first named yourselves, I thought you must know me, but you did not speak, and you asked passage, and I hoped perhaps you were not Aes Sedai, despite your rings. A foolish hope. I could feel the strength of you both, and now the White Tower will know. I cannot promise to keep your secret, but I will do what I can. The woman deserved more. Jorin, I swear by the honor of House Trakand of Andor that I will do my best to keep your secret from any who would harm you or your people, and that if I must reveal it to anyone, I will do all in my ability to protect your people from interference. House Trakand is not without influence, even in the tower, and I will make Mother use it, if need be, somehow. If it pleases the light, Jorin said fatalistically, all will be well. All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of thing will be well, if it pleases the light. There was a damane on that seanchan ship, wasn't there? The windfinder gave her a quizzical look. One of the captive women who can channel. You see deeply for one so young. That is why I first thought you might not be Aes Sedai, because you are so young. I have daughters older than you, I think. I did not know she was a captive. That makes me wish we could have saved her. Wave Dancer outran the seanchan vessel easily at first. We had heard of the seanchan and their vessels with ribbed sails, that they demanded strange oaths and punished those who would not give them. But then the damane broke two of his masts, and they boarded him with swords. I managed to start fires on the seanchan vessel, weaving. Fire is difficult for me beyond lighting a lamp, but it pleased the light to make it enough. And Torum led the crew to fight the seanchan back to their own decks. We cut loose the boarding hooks, and their ship drifted away, burning. They were too occupied with trying to save him to bother us as we limped away. I regretted seeing him burn and sink. Then, he was a fine ship, I think, for heavy seas. Now I regret it, because we might have saved the woman, the damane. Even if she damaged him, perhaps she would not have, free. The light illumine her soul, and the waters take her peacefully. Telling the story had saddened her. She needed to be distracted. Jorin, why do the Atha Anmir call ships he? Everyone else I've ever met calls them she. I don't suppose it makes any difference, but why? The men will give you a different answer, the windfinder said, smiling, speaking of strength and grandness and the like as men will, but this is the truth. A ship is alive, and he is like a man, with a true man's heart. She rubbed the rail fondly, as if stroking something alive, something that could feel her caress. Treat him well, and care for him properly, and he will fight for you against the worst sea. He will fight to keep you alive even after the sea has long since given him his own deathstroke. Neglect him, though, ignore the small warnings he gives of danger, and he will drown you in a flat sea beneath a cloudless sky. Elaine hoped Rand was not as fickle as that. Then why does he hop about, glad to see me go one minute and sending Julin Sandar after me the next? She told herself to stop thinking about him. He was a long way away. There was nothing to be done about him now. She glanced over her shoulder toward the bow. Tom was gone. She was sure she had found the key to his puzzle just before she had felt the windfinder channeling. Something to do with his smile. It was gone, whatever it was. Well, she meant to find it again before they reached Tanchico, if she had to sit on him. But he would still be there in the morning. Jorin, how long before we reach Tanchico? I have been told rakers are the fastest ships in the world, but how fast? To Tanchico. To serve the Coromor, we will not stop at any port between. Perhaps 10 days, if I can weave the winds well enough, if it pleases the light that I find the proper currents. Perhaps as few as 7 or 8 with the grace of the light. 10 days? Elaine gasped. It cannot be possible. She had seen maps, after all. The other woman's smile was half pride, half indulgence. As you yourself said, the fastest ships in the world. The next quickest take half again as long over any stretch, and most more than twice as long. Coasting craft that hug the shore, and anchor in the shallows each night. She sniffed contemptuously. Sigh, doth require 10 times as much. Jorin, would you teach me to do what you were just doing? The Windfinder stared, her dark eyes wide and shining in the fading light. Teach you? But you are Aes Sedai. Jorin, I have never woven a flow half as thick as those you were handling. And the scope of it. I'm astounded, Jorin. The Windfinder stared a moment more, no longer in amazement, but as if trying to fix Elaine's face in her mind. Finally, she kissed the fingers of her right hand and pressed them to Elaine's lips. If it pleases the light, we both shall learn. The High Lords and Ladies were arrayed in a thick hollow circle under the great dome at the chamber's heart, with the lesser nobles ranked behind, row on row back into the forest of columns, all in their best velvets and silks and laces, wide sleeves and ruffed collars and peaked hats, all murmuring uneasily so the towering ceiling echoed the sounds of nervous geese. Only the High Lords themselves had ever before been bidden to this place, called the Heart of the Stone, and they had come only 4 times a year, at the twin demands of law and custom. They came now, all who were not out in the countryside somewhere, at the summons of their new lord, the maker of law and breaker of custom. The packed crowd gave way before Moiraine as soon as they saw who she was, so she and Egwene moved in a pocket of open space. Lan's absence irritated Moiraine. It was not like the man to vanish when she might need him. His way usually was to watch over her as if she could not fend for herself without a guardian. Had she not been able to feel the bond linking them and known he could not be very far from the stone, she might have worried. He fought the strings Nynaeve was tying to him as hard as he had ever fought Trollocs in the Blight, but much as he might deny it, that young woman had bound him as tightly as she herself did, though in other ways. He might as well try tearing steel with his hands as those ties. She was not jealous, exactly, but Lan had been her sword arm, her shield and companion for too many years for her to give him up lightly. I have done what had to be done there. She will have him if I die, and not before. Where is the man? What is he doing? One red-gowned, lace-ruffed woman, a horse-faced lady of the land called Letha, drew her skirts away a bit too assiduously, and Moiraine looked at her, merely looked, without slowing her step, but the woman shuddered and dropped her eyes. Moiraine nodded to herself. She could accept that these people hated Aes Sedai, but she would not endure open rudeness on top of veiled slights. Besides, the rest shied back another step after seeing Letha face down. "Are you certain he said nothing of what he means to announce?" she asked quietly. In this gabble, no one 3 paces away could have made out a word. The Tyrens kept about that distance now. She did not like being overheard. "Nothing," Egwene said just as softly. She sounded as irritated as Moiraine felt. There had been rumors. Rumors? What sort of rumors? The girl was not that good at controlling her face and voice. Clearly she had not heard the tales of doings in the 2 rivers. Betting that Rand had not, though, might be putting her horse at a 10-foot fence. You should bring him to confide in you. He needs an attentive ear. It will help him to talk out his troubles with someone he can trust. Egwene gave her a sidelong glance. She was becoming too sophisticated for such simple methods. Still, Moiraine had spoken unadorned truth. The boy did need someone to listen, and by listening lighten his burdens, and it might work. He will not confide in anyone, Moiraine. He hides his pains, and hopes he can deal with them before anyone notices. Anger flashed across Egwene's face. The wool-brained mule. Moiraine felt a momentary sympathy. The girl could not be expected to accept Rand strolling about arm in arm with Elaine, kissing in corners where they thought themselves unseen. And Egwene did not know the half yet. Commiseration did not last. There was too much of importance to deal with for the girl to be fretting over what she could not have in any case. Elaine and Nynaeve should be aboard the Raker by now, out of the way. Their voyage might eventually tell her if her suspicions about the Windfinders were correct. That was a minor point, though. At worst, the pair had enough gold to buy a ship and hire a crew, which might be necessary given the rumors of Tanchico, with enough left for the bribes so often necessary with Tarrabona officials. Tom Merrilin's room was empty, and her informants had reported him muttering about Tanchico on his way out of the stone. He would see they got a good crew and found the right officials. The purported plan with Mazrim Taim was much the more likely of the two, but her messages to the amyrlin should have taken care of that. The two young women could handle the much less likely eventuality of a mysterious danger hidden in Tanchico, and they were out of her hair and away from Rand. She only regretted that Egwene had refused to go with them. Tarvalon would have been best for all three, but Tanchico would do. Speaking of wool-brained, do you mean to continue with this plan to go into the waste? I do, the girl said firmly. She needed to be back in the tower, training her strength. What was Xuan thinking of? She'll probably give me one of those sayings about boats and fish, when I can ask her. At least Egwene would be out of the way too, and the aiel girl would look after her. Perhaps the wise ones really could teach her something of dreaming. That had been the most astounding letter from them, not that she could afford to heed most of it. Egwene's journey into the waste might be useful in the long run. The last line of Tyrens gave way, making a little hollow, and she and Egwene faced the open area under the vast dome. The nobles' ill ease was most evident here. Many studied their feet like sulky children, and others stared at nothing, looking at anything but where they were. Here was where Calendor had been kept before Rand took it. Here, beneath this dome, untouched by any hand for more than 3,000 years, untouchable by any hand but that of the dragon reborn. Untouchable by any hand but that of the dragon reborn. Tyrens did not like admitting that the heart of the stone existed. Poor woman, Egwene murmured. Moiraine followed the girl's gaze. The High Lady Autaima, already gowned and ruffed and capped in shimmering white, as Tyren widows were, though her husband still lingered, was perhaps the most composed of all the nobles. She was a slender, lovely woman, made more so by her small, sad smile, with large brown eyes and long black hair hanging halfway to her waist. A tall woman, though Moiraine admitted she did tend to judge such things by her own height, and rather too full-bosomed. Caerhinin were not a tall people, and she had been considered short even among them. Yes, a poor woman, she said, but she did not mean it for sympathy. It was good to see Egwene had not yet grown sophisticated enough to see beneath the surface all the time. The girl was already far less malleable than she should have been for years yet. She needed to be shaped before she was hardened. Tom had missed with Altima, or perhaps he had not wanted to see. He seemed to have a strange reluctance to move against women. The High Lady Altima was far more dangerous than her husband or her lover, both of whom she had manipulated without either knowing it. Perhaps more dangerous than anyone else in Tyr, man or woman. She would find others to use soon enough. It was Altima's style to remain in the background and pull strings. Something would have to be done about her. Moiraine shifted her gaze along the rows of high lords and ladies until she found Istander in brocaded yellow silks with a large ivory lace ruff and a tiny matching cap. A certain sternness marred the beauty of her face, and the occasional glances she gave Altima were iron-hard. Feelings between the two went beyond mere rivalry. Had they been men, one would have shed the other's blood in a duel years since. If that antagonism could be sharpened, Altima would be too busy to make trouble for Rand. For an instant she regretted sending Tom away. She did not like having to waste her time with these petty affairs. But he had too much influence with Rand. The boy had to depend on her counsel. Hers, and hers alone. The Light knew he was difficult enough without interference. Tom had been settling the boy down to rule Tyr when he needed to be moving on to greater things. But that was dealt with for now. The problem of bringing Tom Merrilin to heel could be managed later. Rand was the dilemma now. What did he mean to announce? Where is he? He has learned the first art of kings, it seems. Making people wait. She did not realize she had spoken aloud until Egwene gave her a startled look. She smoothed the irritation from her face immediately. Rand would appear eventually, and she would learn what he meant to do. Learn along with everyone else. She nearly ground her teeth. That blind fool of a boy, running headlong through the night with never a care for cliffs, never thinking he could carry the world over as well as himself. If only she could keep him from rushing back to save his village. He would want to, but he could not afford to do so now. Perhaps he did not know, it could be hoped. Matt stood across from them, uncombed and slouching, with his hands in the pockets of his high-collared green coat. It was half unbuttoned as usual, and his boots were scuffed, in sharp contrast to the precise elegance around him. He shifted nervously as he saw her looking at him, then gave one of his rudely defiant grins. At least he was here, under her eye. Matt Cauthon was an exhausting young man to keep track of, avoiding her spies with ease. He never gave any sign that he knew they were there, but her eyes and ears reported that he seemed to slide out of sight whenever they got too close. "I think he sleeps in his coats," Egwene said disapprovingly, "on purpose. I wonder where Perrin is." She went on tiptoes, trying to search over the heads of the assemblage. "I don't see him." Frowning, Moiraine scanned the crowd, not that she could make out much beyond the front row. Lan could have been back among the columns. She would not strain, though, or jump up on her toes like an anxious child. Lan was due a talking to he would not soon forget when she laid hands on him, with Nynaeve tugging at him one way and tarmongaidon, Rand at least, seemingly pulling another. She sometimes wondered how well their bond still held. At least his time with Rand was useful. It gave her another string to the young man. "Perhaps he is with Fael," Egwene said. "He won't have run away, Moiraine. Perrin has a strong sense of duty, almost as strong as a warder's, Moiraine knew, which was why she did not keep eyes and ears on him as she tried to with Matt. Fael has been trying to talk him into leaving, girl. Quite possibly he was with her. He usually was. Do not look so surprised. They often talk and argue where they can be overheard." "I am not surprised, you know," Egwene said dryly, "only that Fael would try to talk him out of what he knows he has to do. Perhaps she does not believe it as he does." Moiraine had not believed it herself at first, had not seen it. 3 tarmongaidon, all the same age, coming out of one village. She must have been blind not to realize they had to be connected. Everything had become much more complicated with that knowledge. Like trying to juggle 3 of Tom's colored balls, one-handed and blindfolded. She had seen Tom do that, but she would not want to try. There was no guide to how they were connected or what they were supposed to do. The prophecies never mentioned companions. "I like her," Egwene said. "She is good for him, just what he needs, and she cares for him deeply. I suppose she does. If Fael became too troublesome, Moiraine would have to have a talk with her about the secrets Fael had been keeping from Perrin, or have one of her eyes and ears do it. That should settle her down. You say it as if you don't believe it. They love each other, Moiraine. Can't you see that? Can't you even recognize a human emotion when you see one?" Moiraine gave her a firm look, one that settled her on her heels in a satisfactory manner. The girl knew so little and thought she knew so much. Moiraine was about to tell her so in withering fashion, when startled, even fearful, gasps rose from among the Tyrens. The crowd gave way hurriedly, more than eagerly, those in front ruthlessly forcing those behind farther back, opening a wide passage to the space beneath the dome. Rand strode down that corridor, looking straight ahead, imperious in a red coat, embroidered with golden scrolls up his sleeves, cradling Calendor in his right arm like a scepter. It was not only he that made the Tyrens give way, though. Behind him came perhaps 100 aiel, spears and arrow-nocked bows in hand. Shufa wrapped around their heads, black veils hiding everything but their eyes. Moiraine thought she recognized Ruark at the front, just behind Rand, but only by the way he moved. They were anonymous, ready for killing. Plainly, whatever he meant to say, Rand intended to quell any resistance before it had a chance to coalesce. The aiel halted, but Rand kept on until he stood centered under the dome, then ran his eye around the gathering. He seemed surprised, and perhaps upset, at the sight of Egwene, but he gave Moiraine an infuriating smile, and Matt one that made the pair of them look like boys when Matt returned it. The Tyrens were white-faced, not knowing whether to stare at Rand and Calendor or the veiled aiel. Either could be death in their midst. "The High Lord Sunamon," Rand said suddenly and loudly, making that plump fellow jump, "has guaranteed me a treaty with Moiraine, strictly following lines I gave him. He has guaranteed this with his life." He laughed as if he had made a joke, and most of the nobles laughed with him. Not Sunamon, who looked distinctly ill. "If he fails," Rand announced, "he has agreed to be hanged, and he will be obliged." The laughter stopped. Sunamon's face took on a sickly tinge of green. Egwene gave Moiraine a troubled glance. She was gripping her skirt with both hands. Moiraine only waited. He had not brought every noble within 10 miles together to tell them of a treaty or threaten a fat fool. She made her hands let go of her own skirts. Rand turned in a circle, weighing the faces he saw. Because of this treaty, ships will soon be available to carry Tyren grain west to find new markets. There were a few appreciative murmurs of that, quickly stifled. But there is more. The armies of Tyr are to march. A cheer rose, tumultuous shouts ringing from the ceilings. Men capered, even the high lords, and shook their fists over their heads and tossed up peaked velvet hats. Women, smiling as rapturously as the men, bestowed kisses on the cheeks of those who would go to war and delicately sniffed the tiny porcelain bottles of smelling salts. No Tyrene noblewoman would be without, pretending to be made faint by the news. "Ilion shall fall," someone cried, and hundreds of voices seized it like thunder. "Ilion shall fall. Ilion shall fall. Ilion shall fall." Moiraine saw Egwene's lips moving, the words crushed beneath the jubilation. She could read them, though. "No, Rand. Please, no. Please don't." On the far side of Rand, Mat was frowning in disapproving silence. They and she were the only ones not celebrating, aside from the ever-watchful Aiel and Rand himself. Rand's smile was twisted contemptuously and never touched his eyes. There was fresh sweat on his face. She met his sardonic stare and waited. There would be more, and not, she suspected, to her liking. Rand raised his left hand. Slowly quiet fell, those in front anxiously shushing those behind. He waited for absolute silence. The armies will move north into Kerhehen. The High Lord Melan will command, and under him the High Lords Gwayam, Arakome, Hane, Marakon, and Simayan. The armies will be generously financed by the High Lord Torean, the wealthiest of you, who will accompany the armies to see that his money is spent wisely. Dead silence greeted this pronouncement. No one moved, though plain-faced Torian seemed to be having trouble standing. Moiraine had to give Rand a mental bow for his choices. Sending those 7 out of Tyr neatly eviscerated the 7 most dangerous plots against him, and none of those men trusted each other enough to scheme among themselves. Tom Merrilin had given him good advice. Obviously her spies had missed some of the notes he had had slipped into Rand's pockets. But the rest? It was madness. He could not have had this for an answer on the other side of that ter'angreal. It was not possible, surely. Melan obviously agreed with her, if not for the same reasons. He stepped forward hesitantly, a lean, hard man, but so frightened that the whites of his eyes showed all the way around. "My Lord Dragon." He stopped, swallowed, and began again in a marginally stronger voice. "My Lord Dragon, intervening in a civil war, is stepping into a bog. A dozen factions contend for the Sun Throne, with as many shifting alliances, each one betrayed every day. Besides that, bandits infest Kerheen as fleas on a wild boar. Starving peasants have stripped the land bare. I am reliably informed that they eat bark and leaves." "My Lord Dragon," a quagmire barely begins to describe. Rand cut him off. "You do not want to extend Tyr's sway all the way to Kinslayer's dagger, Melam. That is all right. I know who I mean to sit on the Sun Throne. You do not go to conquer Milan, but to restore order and peace, and to feed the hungry. There is more grain in the granaries now than Tyr could sell, and the farmers will harvest as much more this year unless you disobey me. Wagons will carry it north behind the armies, and those peasants will not have to eat bark any longer, my Lord Melan." The tall High Lord opened his mouth again, and Rand swung Kalendor down, grounding its crystal point in front of him. "You have a question, Melan?" Shaking his head, Melan backed into the crowd as though trying to hide. "I knew he would not start a war," Egwene said fiercely. "I knew it. You think there will be less killing in this?" Moiraine muttered. What was the boy up to? At least he was not running off to save his village, while the Forsaken had their way with the rest of the world. "The corpses will be piled as high, girl. You will not know the difference between this and a war." Attacking Ilion and Samael would have gained him time, even if it grew into a stalemate. Time to learn his power, and perhaps to bring down one of his strongest enemies, to cow the rest. What did he gain by this? Peace for the land of her birth? Starving cauthon fed? She would have applauded another time. It was laudably humane and utterly senseless now. Useless bloodshed, rather than confronting an enemy who would destroy him given the slightest opening. Why? Lanfear. What had Lanfear said to him? What had she done? The possibilities chilled Moiraine's heart. Rand would take closer watching than ever now. She would not allow him to turn to the shadow. Ah, yes, Rand said, as if just remembering something. Soldiers don't know much about feeding hungry people, do they? For that, I think a kind woman's heart is needed. My Lady Altima, I regret intruding on your grief, but will you undertake to oversee distributing the food? You will have a nation to feed, and power to gain, Moiraine thought. This was his first slip, aside from deciding on cauthon over Ilian, of course. Altima would certainly return to Tyr on an equal footing with Melan or Gayam, ready for more plotting. She would have Rand assassinated before that if he was not careful. Perhaps an accident could be arranged in cauthon. Altima swept a graceful curtsy, spreading her full white skirts, only a touch of her surprise showing. As my Lord Dragon commands, so do I obey. It will please me greatly to serve the Lord Dragon. I was sure it would, Rand said wryly. As much as you love your husband, you'll not want him with you in cauthon. Conditions will be hard for a sick man. I took the liberty of having him moved to the High Lady Estander's apartments. She will care for him while you are away, and send him to meet you in cauthon when he is well. Stander smiled, a tight smile of triumph. Altima's eyes rolled back in her head, and she crumpled in a heap. Moiraine shook her head slightly. He truly was harder than he had been. More dangerous. Egwene started toward the fallen woman, but Moiraine put a hand on her arm. I think she was only overcome by emotion. I can recognize it, you see. The ladies attending her. Several of them had clustered around, patting Altima's wrists and passing smelling salts under her nose. She coughed and opened her eyes and looked ready to faint again when she saw Estander standing over her. Rand just did something very clever, I think, Egwene said in a flat voice. And very cruel. He has a right to look ashamed. Rand did look it at that, grimacing at the floor stones under his boots. Perhaps he was not as hard as he was trying to be. Not undeserved, however, Moiraine observed. The girl showed promise, picking up on what she did not understand. But she still needed to learn to control her emotions, to see what had to be done as well as she saw what she wished could be done. Let us hope he is finished with being clever for today. Very few in the great chamber understood exactly what had happened, only that Altima's fainting had upset the Lord Dragon. A few in the back raised shouts of "Cauthon shall fall," but the cry did not take hold. "With you to lead us, my Lord Dragon, we shall conquer the world," a lumpy-faced young man shouted, half supporting Torren. Estienne, Tyrian's eldest son, the lumpy-faced resemblance was clear, though the father was still mumbling to himself. Jerking his head up, Rand appeared startled, or perhaps angry. "I will not be with you. I am going away for a time." That certainly brought silence again. Every eye was on him, but his attentions were all on Callandor. The crowd flinched as he lifted the crystal blade before his face. Sweat rolled down his face, much more sweat than before. The stone held Callandor before I came. The stone should hold it again until I return. Suddenly, the transparent sword blazed in his hands. Whirling it, hilt uppermost, he drove it down. Into the stone floor. Bluish lightning arced wildly toward the dome above. The stone rumbled loudly, and the stone shook, dancing, heaving, screaming people from their feet. Moiraine pushed Egwene off of her, while tremors still reverberated through the chamber and scrambled erect. What had he done? And why? Going away? It was the worst of all her nightmares. The aiel had already regained their feet. Everyone else lay stunned or huddled on hands and knees. Except for Rand. He was on one knee, both hands holding Callandor's hilt, with the blade driven halfway into the floorstones. The sword was clear crystal again. Sweat glistened on his face. He pried his hands away, one finger at a time, held them cupped around the hilt, yet not touching it. For a moment, Moiraine thought he was going to take hold of it again, but instead he forced himself to his feet. He did have to force himself, she was certain of it. "Look at this while I am gone." His voice was lighter, more the way it had been when she first found him in his village, but no less sure or firm than it had been moments before. "Look at it and remember me. Remember, I will come back for it. If anyone wants to take my place, all they have to do is pull it out." He waggled a finger at them, grinning almost mischievously. "But remember the price of failure." Turning on his heel, he marched out of the chamber, the aiel falling in behind him. Staring at the sword rising out of the floor of the heart, the Tyrens got to their feet more slowly. Most looked ready to run, but too frightened to. "That man," Egwene grumbled, dusting off her green linen dress. "Is he mad?" She clapped a hand to her mouth. "Oh, Moiraine, he isn't, is he? Is he?" "Not yet." "The light send he is not," Moiraine muttered. She could not take her eyes from the sword any more than the Tyrens could. The light take the boy. Why could he not have remained the amenable youngling she had found in Emon's field? She made herself start after Rand. "But I will find out." Half running, they caught up quickly in a broad, tapestry-lined hallway. The aiel, veils hanging loose now but easily raised if needed, moved aside without slowing. They glanced at her, and at Egwene, hard faces unchanging, but eyes touched by the wariness aiel always had around Aes Sedai. How they could be uneasy at her while calmly following Rand, she did not understand. Learning more than fragments about them was difficult. They answered questions freely about anything that was of no interest to her. Her informants and her own eavesdropping overheard nothing, and her network of eyes and ears would no longer try. Not since one woman had been left bound and gagged, hanging by her ankles from battlements and staring wild-eyed at the 400-foot drop beneath her, and not since the man who had simply disappeared. The man was just gone. The woman, refusing to go higher than the ground floor, had been a constant reminder until Moiraine sent her into the country. Rand did not slow down any more than the aiel when she and Egwene fell in on either side of him. His glance was wary, too, but in a different way, and touched with exasperated anger. "I thought you were gone," he said to Egwene. "I thought you went with Elaine and Nynaeve. You should have. Even Tanchico is." "Why did you stay?" "I won't be staying much longer," Egwene said. "I am going to the Waste with Avienda, to Ruidian, to study with the Wise Ones." He missed a step as the girl mentioned the Waste, glancing at her uncertainly, then strode on. He seemed composed now, too much so, a boiling tea kettle with the lid strapped down and the spout plugged. "Do you remember swimming in the waterwood?" he said quietly. "I used to float on my back in a pool and think the hardest thing I'd ever have to do was plough a field, unless maybe it was shearing sheep. Shearing from sun-up till bedtime, hardly stopping to eat until the clip was in." "Spinning," Egwene said. "I hated it worse than scrubbing floors. Twisting the threads makes your fingers so sore." "Why did you do it?" Moiraine demanded before they could go on with this childhood reminiscing. He gave her a sidelong look and a smile mocking enough to belong to Matt. Could I really have hung her for trying to kill a man who was plotting to kill me? Would there be more justice in that than in what I did? The grin slid from his face. "Is there justice in anything I do? Sunamon will hang if he fails, because I said so. He'll deserve it after the way he's tried to take advantage, with never a care if his own people starved, but he'll not go to the gallows for that. He will hang because I said he would, because I said it." Egwene laid a hand on his arm, but Moiraine would not allow him to sidestep. "You know that is not what I mean." He nodded. This time his smile had a frightening rictus quality. Calendor. With that in my hands, I can do anything. Anything. I know I can do anything. But now, it's a weight off my shoulders. You don't understand, do you? She did not, though it nettled her that he saw it. She kept silent, and he went on. "Perhaps it will help if you know it comes from the prophecies. Into the heart he thrusts his sword into the heart to hold their hearts. Who draws it out shall follow after. What hand can grasp that fearful blade? You see, straight from the prophecies. You forget one thing," she told him tightly. "You drew Calendar in fulfillment of prophecy. The safeguards that held it awaiting you for 3,000 years and more are gone. It is the sword that cannot be touched no longer. I could channel it free myself. Worse, any of the Forsaken could. What if Lanfear returns? She could use Calendor no more than I, but she could take it. He did not react to the name, because he did not fear her, in which case he was a fool, or for another reason. If Samael or Ravin or any male Forsaken puts his hand on Calendor, he can wield it as well as you. Think of facing the power you give up so casually. Think of that power in the hands of the shadow. I almost hope they'll try. A threatening light shone in his eyes. They seemed grey storm clouds. There is a surprise awaiting anyone who tries to channel Calendor out of the stone, Moiraine. Do not think of taking it to the tower for safekeeping. I could not make the trap pick and choose. The power is all it needs to spring and reset, ready to trap again. I am not giving Calendor up forever, just until I... He took a deep breath. Calendor will stay there until I come back for it. By being there, reminding them of who I am and what I am, it makes sure I can come back without an army. A haven of sorts, with the likes of Altima and Sunamon to welcome me home. If Altima survives the justice, her husband and Istanda will meet out, and Sunamon survives mine. Light, what a wretched tangle. He could not make it selective, or would not. She was determined not to underrate what he might be capable of. Calendor belonged in the tower. If he would not wield it as he should, in the tower till he would wield it. Just until, what? He had been intending to say something other than, until I come back. But what? And where are you going? Or do you mean to keep it a mystery? She was quietly vowing not to let him escape again, to turn him somehow if he meant to go running off to the 2 rivers, when he surprised her. Not a mystery, Moiraine. Not from you and Egwene, anyway. He looked at Egwene and said one word. Ruidin. Wide-eyed, the girl appeared as astounded as if she had never heard the name before. For that matter, Moiraine felt scarcely less. There was a murmur among the aiel, but when she glanced back, they were striding along with no expression whatsoever. She wished she could make them leave, but they would not go at her command, and she would not ask Rand to send them away. It would not help her with him to ask favors, especially when he might well refuse. You are not an Aiel clan chief, Rand, she said firmly, and have no need to be one. Your struggle is on this side of the dragon wall, unless... Does this come from your answers in the Ter Angrial, Kehine, and Calendor, and Ruidin? I told you those answers can be cryptic. You could be misunderstanding them, and that could prove fatal to more than you. You must trust me, Moiraine, as I have so often had to trust you. His face might as well have belonged to an aiel for all she could read in it. I will trust you for now. Just do not wait to seek my guidance until it is too late. I will not let you go to the shadow. I have worked too long to allow that. Whatever it takes,